I started to get into sustainable investing about 10 years ago, but it really took off over the last few years where massive amounts of capital actually went into sustainable investment strategies. Years of taking the right decisions. I think it's a lot of wrong decisions, but then falling down, getting up again, wiping the dust off and marching forward.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Learning from Leaders series. Today, we have the pleasure to welcome Mirjam Staub-Bisang, Country Manager at BlackRock in Switzerland. And as always, to conduct the interview, Peter Van Am. Good to see you, Peter.
Well, good to see you too, Luc. And of course, the students don't know this, but we actually had the pleasure yesterday to see each other as well, live in person around Lake Geneva. A real pleasure to be back, but also an enormous pleasure and an honor, of course, to have our first Learning from Leaders from the new year. And to kick it off, I'm very honored to welcome Mirjam Staub-Bisang. Mirjam, you work for BlackRock. I think that must be, if not the biggest, one of the biggest financial companies in the world. I want to know all about that. That sounds very impressive. You're also based in Switzerland, I think. That will be my first question. And, you're really an impressive leader overall, having written books, leading several companies, creating one of your own. So I think a lot that we can talk about today with the students. And so why don't we just kick it off right now? Mirjam, welcome. And my first question on these live virtual conferences always is, how are you and where are you joining us from?
Yes, Peter, thank you very much for this invitation. It's such a pleasure to be here with you virtually this afternoon, and hoping to join to speak about my background, my career, my thoughts, and the future, and hoping to bring something valuable to you over the next hour. I'm joining from Switzerland. The background is a bit blurred. I don't know how to change that on Zoom, but I'm joining from Switzerland on an overcast day in Zurich. And that's where I live and work and actually grew up. Thank God I left Switzerland every now and again for a few years, but we'll speak about that later. So
yeah, absolutely. We
great to be here.
Will. And of course, Switzerland is an amazing place to live and to work. Many of our students actually are studying in Switzerland, but on the other side, I think you call it the West Schweiz, the western part of the country in Geneva. Now, Mirjam, we want to talk about your career and your career path, but first, a little bit about the company that you work for, BlackRock. Now, I know BlackRock very well because it is a super big financial company, an asset manager. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is a number I don't even understand, but I think it has about $10 trillion of assets under management. Is that right? I mean, what does that number even mean to put it into context? And maybe, hopefully in Switzerland, it's a little bit smaller. So maybe it's a number we can actually understand. What does BlackRock do in Switzerland?
Yeah. So first, let's start with the 10 trillion in assets. 10 trillion in assets is indeed huge. It's gigantic and represents approximately 10% of managed financial assets globally. So it is indeed huge. And we started the year 2022, so last year, with 10 trillion in assets, but had to bear the brunt of last year's drop in financial markets across asset classes. And I think currently stand at about 8 billion, approximately 8 billion, but fluctuate.
The 8 billion is in Switzerland.
No, sorry, not billion.
It's 8 trillion.
8 trillion in Switzerland because markets dropped globally. In Switzerland, we manage approximately 150 billion. That came down also a bit over the last year. So I think currently around 120, 130 billion. But that's huge. We are number 4 in terms of asset managers in Switzerland. The first 3 are UBS, Credit Suisse, and Swisscanto, and we're the largest international asset manager to manage assets in Switzerland.
I mean, it's unbelievable the size of these companies. How do you even go about managing that money? Tell us a little bit more about that, because I think that you have made a specialization personally. You've made a specialization in what's called sustainable investing. Now tell us what sustainable investing is, because isn't all investing sustainable? Don't we all want to sustain our money?
Yeah, you wish. No, so let me start with business overall. When we speak about BlackRock, most of our money is managed in so-called ETFs and index investments. So indexed investments, passive investments, and but then we also have active investment funds and alternative investment funds. Everything is managed in a pooled way.
Yeah, hold on. I got to stop you right there, because I know that if you were talking to, seasoned professionals, we'd all know what you're talking about. But of course, some of our students are just getting to know the financial system. So when you say you have active management and passive management, just the very basics of that. So active management means if I'm managing your money, like I'm picking the stocks, I choose what to buy and sell, me as a person, there's somebody picking those investments, and passive investing is something else, yeah?
Yeah, passive investing is investing in line with a certain index. So I would imagine most of you have heard of the S&P 500, the SMI, the Swiss Market Index in Switzerland, the MSCI World, or certain country indexes like Eurostoxx or so. So these are indices which are composed of certain stock, usually market like weighted according to their size, their market capitalization. And then the investment fund, an index, so-called index fund, or then ETF, exchange traded fund, which is a sort of an index fund, invests slavishly according to the index composition. So there's no magic stock picker behind the index. You would expect behind the index fund, you would expect the performance of the index fund be that of the index minus costs. So costs are super important. Usually index funds are very cheap. Cheap
meaning you don't charge a lot of fees for a client to be able to invest his money or her money into an ETF.
So
because it's passive. There's not, the client doesn't have to do much and you don't have to do much.
Exactly. It's all done digitally, kind of. There are no people necessary, and it's totally scalable. So more money means more computing power, but doesn't mean more people. I would say the same applies
of scale there.
For actively managed funds. You need one portfolio manager, and then asset management is a very scalable business. But when we look at fee levels, just to compare the costs, on average, I would say an actively managed fund, be it, let it be around 1% management fee, can also be 80 basis points, maybe 50 basis points, but not much below. An ETF or an index fund, or say a mandate managed for a pension fund according to an index, can be just a few basis points. So here we speak about 5%, 10% of the costs of an actively managed fund. Now, index investing or ETFs, actually ETF investing is a fairly recent thing. So it really started to take off over the last decade. 20 years ago, you didn't really have that yet. You had a few index funds, but this really took off over the last decade or two. And before that, it was very much about active stock picking. Personally, I still do both. Sorry?
You've been a stock picker. You've picked stocks in the past.
No. To be honest, yes, I have picked a few stocks in the past, but because I'm not very good at following my portfolio, and I always have something else to do. I've been probably below averagely is successful. I don't even know, because I buy and hold. I don't sell because I forget. So I buy active investment funds because I like portfolio managers who pick stocks, but then just to gain exposure to the market, I don't want to pay a lot of money. So I buy ETFs as well.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Now, my initial question, of course, was about your specialty, which is sustainable investing. So tell us now that we know active investing, passive investing, what's sustainable investing?
Yeah, so sustainable investing, again, here, a short history of sustainable investing. Sustainable investing is a very, say, young practice. Again, it started to take off, but not really. About 10 years ago, I started to get into sustainable investing about 10 years ago, but it really took off over the last few years, where massive amounts of capital actually went into sustainable investment strategies. Sustainable investment strategies tries to maximize returns over the long term in a risk-adjusted way, and taking into account sustainability risks. So ESG risk, environmental risks, social risk, and so-called governance risks. So it takes into account all these so-called extra financial risks, which over the long term really matter. Let's think about climate change, the most prevalent risk and probably most talked about sustainability risk. Here we think about physical risks to say physical assets, to property,
Right.
for example, from storms, but we also speak about so-called transition risks, regulation that's changing, and companies that suddenly find themselves in a market that has changed because the customers don't want to buy their products anymore. Maybe all of you or half of you or 3/4 of you are vegan. Well, that wasn't the case 30 years ago. People
Right. And then you want to invest in a company that, for example, doesn't just sell meat, but that sells non-meat products as well.
Exactly.
That
That is positioned for this change, and positioned also for a regulatory change. If you have a regulatory change that carbon emissions need to be curtailed, then you want to invest in companies which are prepared for that change and have taken measures to bring down their carbon emissions, for example.
So for example, a renewable energy company would be more sustainable than a oil company, for example.
Yeah, but simply put, when we speak about sustainable investment strategies, there are different approaches. They go from excluding certain stocks, certain brown stocks, fossil fuel stocks. They're strategies that integrate these ESG risks. So in the security, in the analysis of companies, you really also look at these sustainability risks. They're so-called thematic investments, which, for example, invest in resource efficiency, wind energy, kind of sustainability themes, and then we go all the way to impact investing, which.
And so you've made this really into your personal specialty, right? Like I think you've written 2 books now. I remember one because I read it. 2 books specifically on sustainable investing.
Yeah, I can really pride myself that 10 years ago, I wrote the first book on sustainable investing, and
before anyone else, really, right?
Before anyone else did it, and I thought we are about to launch this big trend of sustainable investing. Frankly, it took a few years longer. I would say that big trend started about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's really about to mainstream. But maybe if I say about to mainstream, it's probably not true yet. I mean, if we look at sustainable assets in this whole universe of professionally managed assets, there are different ways of accounting for them. There are some sources would say 10% up to say 30-40% are sustainably managed. Really,
and that's of course because you can sort of say we're going to exclude the worst performers, and then you still have 90% of the stocks that you can invest in. That would be sort of like a sustainable investing light, if you will. And then you could go farther and say we're only going to invest into like the best performers, like the greenest companies, and then you only have a few companies. Now,
exactly, best in class investing versus exclusion, and then all shades of green in between.
All shades of green. I like that expression. Now, of course, BlackRock also on this front has been a real leader, has been really pushing this idea of ESG investing. ESG, again, environmental, social, corporate governance, risk investing. But we've seen a big drop in the market last year. You talked about it, like many shares lost money anyway. And then I don't know if anyone knows this, but in the United States in particular, a lot of people have sort of been making a lot of noise and saying, we don't like ESG investing. We don't like green investments. how did that affect you? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, it's been actually really tough. And you touch an important topic. I mean, BlackRock has a relatively young history in sustainable investing. I only joined the firm, joined it 4 years ago. 3 years ago, Larry Fink, our CEO and founder, came and climate risks are investment risks. And this was revolutionary at the time for a large asset manager, an American asset manager.
To say that, right?
To say that. I mean, this was still the Trump era, we have to remember. So that was novel. It was strong. And we really followed suit to this belief, changed our investment process throughout all investment products, all asset classes, and really took a strong stance in our engagement as a shareholder, representing all our clients with companies. So we started to push companies and through our index investments, through our ETFs, we hold approximately 5 to 7% in any large company. We push them to make transparent, to give us transparency about the climate risks they have identified in their businesses, and then tell us about the measures they were thinking about taking to mitigate those climate risks. Were they going to sell off some high carbon emitting parts of the business?
Because it's norm. I mean, like you would want companies to be, responsible if they know that it's bad for the environment, that they would not invest in bad things for the environment. And even if they don't think it's bad for the environment, you would think, if there's regulation, if there's laws, if you're forced by, your government to, not do those kinds of things, well, then, you're going to make less money. If you do, you're going to get fines, you're going to lose money. So it seems just very common sense what you say. But you said on the one hand, it was revolutionary. And on the other hand, there's still people that oppose it. What was going on? What happened?
I think here you make the very, very important distinction. And that is, we are not doing this. We are not pushing companies to make climate risk transparent and mitigating it to improve the state of the world. I wish we were doing that. No, we're not doing that. We want to reduce risk, climate risk in our clients' portfolio. We do that to maximize long-term risk-adjusted investment performance. We do that because we see it as our fiduciary duty to actually shed light on the climate risks in clients' portfolios.
Mirjam, but I want to stop you right there for a second, because you've used a lot of words that maybe people that are not in the sector don't understand. This idea of fiduciary duty, that basically means that because you manage other people's money, you have to make sure that you do that in a responsible way. You cannot, lose their money. You have to keep their money, and hopefully you have to grow their money. That's what your job is. And so because you say, I have that responsibility, I see all these risks on the horizon. I see like these climate risks, as you call them. And then I got to let these companies know that I invest in, like, hey, I have a fiduciary responsibility. I'm invested in your company. Please also be responsible. That's what it is, isn't it?
I think that's exactly the point. And perhaps if we go back to this initial distinction between active investing and passive investing, as an active investor, I can always say, I dropped that company from my portfolio to reduce that risk. But as a passive investor, if I have to follow the equity index, I cannot decide I don't want to own Shell in my portfolio anymore because I feel they manage that risk poorly. But that's really just an example, a theoretical example. So I am trapped as an ETF manager, as an asset manager that manages ETFs in that company, in that stock, as a shareholder. So the only measure I have to say mitigate those climate risks in my portfolio, inherent in my portfolio, is by pushing the companies to take measures. That's the only thing I can do. So that's what we're doing now. while the market, our clients said, wow, that's actually really good. Now, suddenly, over the last year or so, we became the punching ball of political interests in America, in particular, that felt our approach to sustainable investing, to calling out climate risk, was against the nations, or the southern nations, the oil producing states' interest in against their economic interests. So there was a lot of pushback that came from the southern states, the oil states, Texas, really in the lead here. And to the extent that some of those states stopped doing business with us. Stop doing business with us means that while we used to have mandates managing assets for state employee pension funds, we lost some of those.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal.
It's absolutely fascinating. And it sort of makes the question. I mean, like, I thought, you're just managing money. You're putting money in the market. That's it. Sounds simple enough, but like they talk about all these political pressures, all these, lobbying that comes with it. I mean, like, now I'm not sure anymore if I want to take your job. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds like a very, very big responsibility.
Yeah. Well, because then, that's what's happening in the States. A lot of pushback. But now in Europe, the pressure comes from a completely different direction, because in Europe, sustainability is very important. So we are called out. BlackRock is called out.
We're not doing enough.
Not doing enough. Not supporting sustainability initiatives enough. So on the one hand, we're really squeezed in the middle right now, and we have decided to stick by our belief that climate risks are investment risks, and that it's that fiduciary duty that you so nicely described, that we have to manage the money responsible. This, what we're doing, how we vote with our shares, and how we interact with the companies that we're invested in.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I understand it a lot better now, and also what is your job, your financial, your fiduciary responsibility. Now, I do want to know, Mirjam, like, do you feel like we, all of us, companies, anyone, you as a financial company, do you feel like it is also a moral duty to, take action to prevent climate change? Or are you just like, it's risk, and that's the only reason why I get involved?
Well, I think there's my personal belief. I think there's also a moral duty to society, but I don't think we need to go that far, because as, say, a manager of pension fund assets, I know what all the insured people want. They want to have a secure pension at the end of their working life.
Enough. That the market will regulate then.
Yeah, and if I believe
long-term return, long-term, that there's a climate risk. And so you don't even need to think about your moral responsibility, because, the mechanisms are clear from a financial point of view.
Because morals are different. People think differently about it. And I think if you have to start discussing morals, it becomes very murky. I mean, take, for example, child labor. Child labor is terrible, and some people will say, I will not own a company which has anything to do with child. 10% child labor is not that bad, and maybe some families, they have a bit of child labor, but at least they can survive. There's like all these considerations to take, and you just don't want to go there. I think if we stay with our fiduciary duty, that we want to maximize long-term risk-adjusted returns for our clients, that will guide the way pretty perfectly. Also, when we think about social issues, not just environmental issues, I mean, the most impacted by environmental damage are the poorest in the world. So we do the most for them if we protect them from the impacts of climate change.
Yeah, I mean, this is all so fascinating. I'm sure we could continue to talk about this topic forever. But, we also want to ask you some personal questions, Mirjam. One of the things that I think many people are wondering about is, when you look at the banking sector, the financial sector, usually you think of like a man in a suit, the bosses are men, and that's what we're used to almost. Now you're a woman, you're at the top of a very big financial company in Switzerland. What you've said so far just sounds like, you're a very good professional, and that's why you made it to the top. As a woman, was it financial sector, you're good at your job, you're going to rise to the top, or is there more to it?
That's an interesting question. And it probably applies, my answer would apply to men and women alike. First, I think a successful career after, say, being 20 years plus in the business has to do a lot with luck, being in the right place at the right time. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I've seen the most talented people who never made it, and I've seen not great people reaching it very far. But
right.
It's not about taking 20 years of taking the right decisions. I think it's a lot of wrong decisions, but then falling down, getting up again, wiping the dust off and marching forward. I think that's what gets you to a successful career. And then maybe you're lucky and you get a great opportunity. You
right.
lean in, you double down, and you make sure you get seen. I was championing a leadership program for younger female employees last week, and this week in Budapest. And that was exactly the point. That's the advice I would give to women, but I would say to those women, but I think that's the advice I give to young professionals. Lean in. If there's an opportunity, lean in, jump in with both feet. If it doesn't work out, you don't like it, you can always try again. I mean, that's the beauty of being young. But then also make sure you're being seen. Make sure not everybody else takes your credit. So women, I think, especially have to learn that. In the past, I would say men were better at that. But, opportunities have been so abundant for women over the last 10 years, really, that...
Is that maybe one part of the
has changed?
Is that part of the explanation that, we've talked to CEOs that were perhaps, a little older than you know what I mean? And so maybe for an older generation, it was still sort of like a gender pattern that played. Do you feel like for your generation and perhaps more importantly for the students today, are you hopeful that that's no longer the case, that there's sort of a gender discrimination, at least in the markets that you've been active in, which is, Europe and the UK?
I mean, Europe and the UK, and certainly also the US, I would say there's absolutely equal opportunities for women, especially when they're starting out, for women and men when they're starting out. And we see that also, the applications we get in general, we get fantastic application both for men and women. When it really when things start to get difficult is perhaps when people get to the age where they start to build families and take decisions to stay out of a job 5 to 10 years. I mean, that has a terrible impact on the career path of any professional, be that a man or be that a woman.
Yeah.
And also what I said this week to these professionals, I said, I don't think you can afford it anymore as a woman. I mean, it's still the fact that women have children. I have 3 children of my own, and it's tough, to manage it all. But to stay out of a job for 10 years and then continue on a lower path has a significant financial impact. And with longevity nowadays,
we live longer.
We live longer. You can't
like you have to
afford
work.
it. You simply can't afford it.
And how did you make it work? I mean, I know it's far away for some of the students. I mean, I don't think many of them, have families or have to make tough choices. But what were some of the key moments in your career where you sort of made a choice and made it work?
Yeah, and the good thing is I'm speaking to students of a business school. I'm not speaking to students of an art school, so it's slightly different. I mean, you understand the power of compounding. $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. It's about staying in the job when things get tough. I mean, for me, it was easier because I had children late in life, relatively late in life.
So you're already senior in the company.
I was already senior. I had more flexibility. I had more money. I could afford help to help with childcare. So it was manageable to stay in a job and to continue. Whereas if you're at that moment where you're just about to make it to the next level and then you drop out for a few years, then it gets tough. But then I would say today even, and I see that in a company like BlackRock, and here I think the same applies for all the large companies. You know, all these companies try to retain talent. So if you're a talented female individual, and again,
or male,
or male, it starts to go for both genders. You give that flexibility. In the UK, our employees, they can leave the firm for 6 months. Well, 6 months is statutory,
anyone,
but
right? Like
for a year and come back in the same job. They get their full pay, they get their full bonus for 6 months. So wow. This is really amazing. This is better than in Switzerland. And
that's amazing. I mean, that's really amazing. So do you think that, and you've also worked in London for a while. Would you say that, you know, doing that, because, you know, Switzerland, you were born in Switzerland, you grew up in Switzerland, you're in Switzerland now. It's a rather conservative country in comparison to some other European countries. Would you say that for you, you know, moving from where you were from to another country, which in your case was the UK, that also helped you chart your own personal and professional path? And would you recommend it to students that to do the same, to sort of say, like, I'm going out of my comfort zone, my own country, and I go somewhere else to sort of take the next step?
I think that's so important, especially coming from a conservative country like Switzerland, with a very conservative society. It was so refreshing to be in a place like London or New York and see professional women there, role models. That really shaped my perspective on a potential career. I wouldn't have had that at my time in Switzerland. So it was tremendously important for me then, but also today. You know, I think it's fantastic if you have the opportunity. You're young, you have no strings attached. Go to New York, go to Asia, explore the world, because that's something that gets harder and harder to do the older you get. If I look at myself, one thing I really regret is not having done that, not having done more of that in my younger years. I've moved
to, for example, in your case, to Asia. You know, in this school, the amazing thing is that almost all the students, they've already moved countries. You know, like you've got a lot of students that join us from like anywhere in the world that came to Europe. If they're from within Europe, they came from another country and came to Switzerland or to Spain. And your advice is just keep on doing that, right? After you graduate?
Well, probably not forever, because you also need a certain stability eventually and make your path. And probably it's worthwhile eventually to settle down somewhere, because that's where you're going to make your career. I mean, there's only few people who can just travel around all the time. And I think especially if you have a spouse, it gets more and more difficult, because if both of you are working, then you're probably not going to find a job in every location you get carried to. But eventually, you know, before you settle down, you know, travel as much as you can and explore the world and gain experience to different working environments. And some companies offer these global career
to do that
paths.
within the company, right?
It's probably easier to do it within the company if you actually like the company. It's a shame to give that up and change.
Yeah. Now you've definitely switched countries. You've also switched companies. I look at your CV. You worked at like Merrill Lynch, Commerce Bank, you know, Swiss Life, and now of course BlackRock. But one of the things that you've also done, and I want to know about that, Mirjam. I mean, like at some point you actually ran your own company. Tell us about that, you know, the successes, the failures, the reasons why you did it, and perhaps the reason why you're now at BlackRock.
Yeah, no, that was a tremendous experience, an entrepreneurial experience. I always wanted to do that, and I was just waiting for an opportunity to do that. I did my MBA at INSEAD, when I was 29. I came back, went and worked in private equity. I worked in hedge funds, and I met many great entrepreneurs, and I wanted to be one of them. When I had the opportunity to start with a few partners to start an investment management company, and was approached by a client who wanted to co-invest with us and brought us the first assets, I did not hesitate and jumped in with both feet, not really knowing what to expect. And today, looking back, I think, wow, that was courageous. Or maybe I should say naive. I didn't.
Both.
I didn't realize how hard it would be to build up a business without the calling card of a large firm. I managed nevertheless. But there were tough times. We started, and then 3 years later, we had faced with the great financial crisis in 2008. I mean, we almost had to fold our business and start afresh. And it was a near-death experience, honestly. And I thought, no, I can't do that.
Financially, I'm sure. Yeah.
Financially, we would have lost all our money. Clients would have lost money. It was terrible. But we hung in there, and we hung in there for the clients, really. I thought, we can't just drop it now, and you know, and if you're personally invested and these are your clients' relationships, you can't just walk away. Probably would have walked away if I hadn't been in my company at the time, but I didn't, and it paid off. It paid off handsomely for all the partners. It worked really well for clients, and my partners have continued. It's today a successful multifamily office. They're doing really well. But eventually, after a good 10, 12 years, I was done with it. I felt, you know, am I going to do this for another 20 years? Or do I need to experience something else? And it was kind of a pivotal moment in life, also a personally pivotal moment. My mother died, you know. Some people, you know, these things happen, and then I thought, I need a break. I really want to reassess priorities in my life. And I was in the process of reassessing priorities in my life. And I got a phone call at BlackRock, and I thought, well, I kind of was waiting for something like that. What a great opportunity to do some sustainable investing at BlackRock and help them build up that practice within the firm. So I was hired. I was offered a job as country manager, which was a great position, but also as a senior advisor to BlackRock Sustainable Investing, which at the time had like 20 people, which now grew to a very, very large and important business within the firm. And to be part of that journey was just a great privilege, and still it is to the very day.
Yeah, and that's of course why you talked earlier on this idea of, like, in a career you also need to have luck, because of course, you know, like, you could have had more luck when you started your company and there was not a financial crisis. You also could have had less luck when you were figuring out your next options, and you got the call from BlackRock. I mean, that was a once in a lifetime opportunity you couldn't miss. So, I mean, it's very good to know that, you know, even when you reach the top, that, you know, still you're aware of the fact that along the way, there's those moments where, you know, you either have luck or you're not. And of course you worked hard. Of course, you're very talented. Of course, you're an expert, but still you need luck.
So are many other people. And stars need to align. The country manager before me found another job. They needed someone, you know, and here I was, and I thought, am I really the best person for that job? And I thought, well, if they think I am, I'm just going to jump in with both feet.
Yeah, and look at what that led to.
And if it doesn't work, well,
now,
you know, I can only.
You said something, a very interesting word there, and I want to pick up a conversation from the chat. You said, I'm the best person for the job. Now, people in the chat are asking, you know, what about non-humans? You know, because like a lot of investing nowadays happens through like algorithms, AI, robots. You know, do you think that at some point AI is going to take over? Do you have AI running some of your investment tools, and what's the future of AI in investing?
We don't have AI yet to run our investments, although we have a part of our business or investment strategy. So they use
algorithms.
You know, algorithms to invest. To what extent that will morph into AI, I'm not sure, but I could imagine that will play a role. I find AI pretty scary. When I ask my children, the other day to no, hang on. That the really scary thing was I get this amazing love letter from my husband. I was like, what is this? I mean,
Oh, wow.
why would he write something like that? And why would
It wasn't
I was
written by
really
him.
irritating. And then he said, well, I just generated this with this new AI tool.
Wow.
I just said love letter to Mirjam, and I don't know, 2-3 criteria. It sounded amazing. And then my son came up with a perfect essay on Roman kings, and I was like, oh my god!
So I mean, we've all seen this, of course, ChatGPT and you know the abilities that it has. You know, it passed the Wharton MBA exam. You know, like there's so many things it can do. But do you think that it will replace humans also in your sector? I mean, like, can we still aspire to be like you, or is the next you like some robot?
I would hope not, because and that's a study the World Economic Forum did a couple of years ago, and you're probably familiar with it. And
yeah,
I remember
the number of jobs that will be taken over by robots.
Yeah, but also the skills that we need will be needed for the future.
Right.
Like it's creativity, it's empathy, and it's emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is crucial for any kind of human interaction, relationship building. And I think it's these emotional intelligence capabilities and qualities that will be very much needed in the future. I'm sure, you know, writers, you're a writer. I'm not sure, you know, if writing.
Oh yeah, you're scared
grammar,
for me. Right?
Yeah,
we're still doing the teaching. I think that's okay.
Exactly, teaching. We will be needing teaching, but when you think about the mere skill of writing, proper grammar, all these things that are emphasized today in schools, who needs proper grammar? I'm a fan of proper grammar, right. But I don't think we'll need that in the future. Perfect Excel models, probably don't need that in the future either. But I think a sound assessment to build relationship with people, to interact, but also, you know, when we go beyond the pure business, but rather think about society, aging society, right. Care, and all that. I mean, humans won't go away. Of course,
there will be enough jobs for us left. You know, I want to make sure, Mirjam, that we leave some opportunity for some of the students that have joined us to also ask a question, and perhaps we can kick it off with Ron. Ron, you're actually from Kosovo, I believe, but you're studying in Geneva, so you're probably very near to us. Yeah. And you've got a question about working in the financial sector.
Sure. Thank you, Mirjam. It's been really nice listening to you, and your professional journey is very inspiring. I wanted to ask, is there like one standout tip that you can give to a Bachelor of Business Administration student trying to work in finance?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's a good question. I always can reflect on my own experience and the people I work with, younger people I work with. I think there's a value to starting your professional career in a place which gives you a lot of education. Of course, the attraction of startups, the next crypto startup, and so on, is probably very high. But I think there's also the element of professional socialization. So looking back on my career and the people I work with, I think to start out with a few years with a large company which provides good on-the-job education has a great value. So if you get into a good firm, I would probably grab that job and then jump in with both feet and see where it gets you. And then eventually, if you're done with it, leave again, because it just catapults you on a new platform for which you can launch the next steps of your career.
That's really helpful, I think. And thank you for leaning on that question. You know, we had a similar question from Felix Brühl in the chat, Mirjam, and he says that he actually, he's doing a master's and he's started his own company. So he's developing his own company at the same time as studying. And he's now wondering, would it be a good idea to continue doing that company, or should I rather sort of like turn towards internships at established companies, the ones that you've been talking about, to make sure that I can sort of continue to develop well as a professional? What would you say?
Yeah,
Do them both.
well, I don't know what Felix's company does, but I think if there is, I think it also, pays off to double down on that for a while. And the good thing is, the moment you will need external money, and the moment will probably come, that's the market test. What seasoned investors will think: will they give you your money to? Will they give you their money to build that company? Do they think it's a good idea? Do they trust that you're the right person to bring this company to the next level? If you find external money from reputable investors other than your mom and your aunt, I think it's definitely worth giving a try. But not many people have such an opportunity. Just because you have an idea, it's not the business yet, and it's not the next unicorn. But
Right.
If you have it, you think it's great, you find people to join you and people to finance you. Hey, go for it.
That's amazing. And by the way, I love the fact that you mentioned your mom and your aunt as your funders, as opposed to
because
your
50%, I just read that today, 50% of the wealthy people of the future are women. So
that's why that's
it's likely that your mother survives your dad and your aunt survives your uncle. So they have the money.
That's a very good tip. We got also a question from Neil. Neil is from India, but he's in Spain, I think, Neil. And I think you're even on campus. Do you want to go and ask your question?
Sure. It's a pleasure talking to you here. So I'll just move on with my question. And the question is like, you have an amazing academical background and as well as a long-standing experience. So nowadays, some people make it without a college graduation, and some people just simply thrive from the school. So in your opinion, is experience as valuable as education? And how?
Well, that's one of my favorite questions, of course. And I think there's a time for everything. And it's hard to go back and get that education that you missed out on in the early years of your life. So, in Switzerland, we always have the option of the apprenticeship. And from the apprenticeship, you can make your way to university, and usually these are amazing people to work with. We have a few of them here at BlackRock, but we would never hire somebody on a professional path without a university, which would be amazing. But they don't even they never even make it to the universe of potentially selected candidates. So I would say it's probably a safe bet to do a bachelor. There's nothing would, I don't think not, I think
you're speaking to the right audience here. Everyone is at least doing a bachelor.
Yeah, a bachelor, 100%. Now, do you need a master's? Maybe not. There's a lot of people who also have very successful careers without a master's, but the bachelor, 100%. The master's, I think it's, if you know what you're going to do, you get a master's, be that technical, be that an MBA. Probably, I'm a fan. I did so much education.
You've hired people that have just done bachelors?
Sorry?
You've hired people at BlackRock that have just done bachelors?
Yes, many of them, and people have made tremendous careers just with a bachelor. So I think the master's is a great, nice to have, but probably not that relevant if you have decided you're doing your career in one sector. I think an MBA, that was my experience. I have a background in law. I'm a lawyer, attorney at law. And then I made that career change. And I felt the MBA gave me a lot of confidence to feel comfortable to move beyond one industry. It helped me a lot to have a lot of confidence, but not everybody needs that. We have to be fair. Yeah. So it comes also with a lot of cost. So it's something to weigh against each other.
Maybe two short questions to end with on this topic. On the one hand, there's a Kenyan student that has joined us in Geneva. He's asking, at what point would you say it's time to give up if you're not lucky, as you say? You say you can be lucky, you can be unlucky. At what point do you sort of think it's right to give up? And then Alex is asking, what are the requirements of getting hired at BlackRock, regardless of the educational level? What are some for?
Okay, I think the first one, to give up. Never give up. I mean, that's a leading question. How can you ever give up? So it's maybe you give up temporarily. Maybe you decide to fold a startup because you can't get financing anymore. Of course, then you have to give up. If you're burnt out in a job, of course, maybe it's time.
If you don't find your favorite job, like you've been really trying to get into a company, you can't get a job in the industry. At what point do you move on?
Well, I think after a careful analysis, why you're not getting that job. Right. Do you lack the education needed for the job? Are you do you lack legal requirements? Maybe if you want to get a job in Switzerland, you can't get a work permit because you don't fulfill the requirements. Then perhaps you say, I love the industry, but I can't do it in Switzerland. Then maybe I go and try it in the US, depending on,
that's a really good tip, isn't it? Because many of these companies have sort of a global reach. Yeah. You went to speak to people in Hungary, for example. I guess not many people were considering to go to Hungary, but it looks like BlackRock has an office there. Then what about BlackRock?
For Hungarians, it's probably easier to get the job at BlackRock in Hungary and then transfer to London. It would be hard. For many of them, it might be hard to get the job, land the job in London in the first step. So maybe it takes a few steps, sometimes a lateral step.
Strategy, right? I've seen people do that. They start in a local office. Their dream is to go to New York or London or maybe Zurich. But they start in a local office and then get the internal transfer, which is a little bit easier. Exactly. Now, the BlackRock. So if you want to work at BlackRock, what are the top skills that you're looking for? Perhaps all the soft skills, by the way.
We have so many different parts in the company. There's investing, there is sales, but then there are also kind of operations. As an ETF doesn't need investment skills, but a lot of people who manage operations. Then there are people in risk management. Then there are people in HR, in marketing.
Right.
It's a huge marketing machine. So there is everything. There's so many different jobs at BlackRock, and so as a student at your level, doing a bachelor, doing a master's, I would go on the website, check out the internships, apply for the internships. Of course, we look for people who are analytical, who are confident, who can deliver, who have done ideally previous internships, who have good degrees from good schools. It's multi-factor, I would say.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and it's good to be reminded there's so many different jobs, even in one single company. Maybe on this point, I want to bring in Mauricio. Mauricio, you're from Mexico, but you're also in Barcelona. I think you're next to Neil. So we're looking forward to your question. I think it's also in this theme.
Yeah. So first of all, hey, Mirjam, it's an honor to be speaking with such a great leader as yourself. Thanks for taking your time to be here to teach us all these live valuable lessons. And my question is, as a member of the EMEA committee, you must have constant discussions with the other committee members, right? So what are the most important soft skills you use to encourage others to follow your proposals?
Thank you, Mauricio. I think that's a very interesting question. It doesn't only for me in my day job apply to the EMEA Executive Committee. It applies to my Swiss Leadership Committee. It applies to working groups. And what I try to do, if I'm really persuaded of something I want to do, I think is a good proposal, I always try to put myself in the other person's shoe and try to understand what would be his benefit from taking my proposal. Is this mutually beneficial, that proposal? Will it help him or her advance her objectives as well? Or do I just want to achieve something which doesn't benefit anybody else? So I think always
putting yourself in the other person's shoes, basically.
Yeah, I think that's where it all starts. And here we're back to the emotional intelligence. It's being self-aware, but it's also being aware of what others want, what the interests of others are, and that's usually a good starting point. But then committees, this is always a team approach. And I think the better is the biggest enemy of the good. I think I have a good idea, but maybe somebody else comes up with a better idea. And then it might be the moment where I have to step back and support somebody else's idea to actually achieve something greater for the benefit of a group. Here at BlackRock,
that's really good advice too, where you sort of say like, hey, it's not always about me. It's not always about my ideas. Being successful and being appreciated by others also has to do with every once in a while leaning into other people's ideas and then recognizing them.
Yeah. And, together actually achieving more than an individual could. At BlackRock, we have this so-called principle. It's called One BlackRock, that we all stand together and together try to achieve the best for our clients and the firm. That's the guiding principle of everything we do. And it's not just, speech and shallow speech. It's really truly the way we live. And, we speak about that. We say, this is one BlackRock or this is not one BlackRock. And
right.
So it's really the client's interest and the firm's interest before the individual's interest. Very clearly.
I want to ask you one final question, which came in from Delphine Malherbe. She's interested in sustainability. And so she's asking if, I were to start in sustainability now, for example, start my own business. What do you think is the most interesting, sort of specific part of sustainability? Which location, which industry? What are some of the things you're most excited about in the sustainability field?
Yeah, well, I think sustainability right now, I think there's two super interesting aspects, and I'm glad you asked. I think the one is transitioning from brown to green, and that you can do virtually in any industry that needs
green. That means you go from something that's coal powered to something that's powered by green energy,
for example, or just change the business offering, which is now brown and needs to be lower carbon. You could also go to the food industry. You can say, oh, okay, this, for example, a company which has a lot of dairy products and with a lot of cows, having their emissions, so to speak. And now we think about vegan food that isn't based on dairy. I mean, that's brown to green. It's milk to vegan, but that's essentially brown to green. So you can do that virtually across any industry. And then I think there are the frontier topics in sustainability, which I think are all right now nature related. That's so that we're going from looking at climate risk and emissions to protecting nature, and see that as valuable as protection from climate risk. And
that's really the new frontier. I look forward to a new book from you on nature-based investing.
Yes. That would be my next project.
I'm afraid we ran out of time. I mean, I feel like we could have talked for another hour or two, but we want to be respectful. We're both in Switzerland. That means that we have to end on the hour. So I want to thank you so much for sharing all of your insights with us, not just, from a professional point of view, all of the things you do on the investment side, but also on the personal side. I think we learned really a lot from all of that. And I want to thank you on behalf of EU Business School. You're always welcome to join us. You now know that you can join us either in Geneva, Munich, or Barcelona. So have your pick. And we wish you all the best. And for now, we want to thank you. And I think it's going to be Luc who's going to have the final word of this session. But already, thank you from my side.
Thank you, Peter. Just a big thank you to all of you attending the session. This was fantastic. This was great fun. Again, I just learned a lot from your questions, and I hope this was helpful. I tremendously enjoyed it. Luc.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mirjam. Yes, indeed, great session. We get a lot of arts and thumbs up in the session from the crowd. That's very good.
Oh, how do you do that?
So yes, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening or your day. For us, the next session from Learning from Leaders will be a live session from Geneva where we will have the Seas family coming, talking about the Seas Bank and the Seas Group. That will be February 9. So in the meantime, have a great evening, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you at our next session. Thank you.